What if the reason he stopped chasing you was not because you were not enough, but because you gave too much too soon, in a way that removed the space for him to value you? Because there are four quiet emotional rules that change everything in attraction. And when a woman naturally applies them, she is not just loved in the moment, she is remembered long after she is gone. Have you ever noticed how some women are not necessarily the loudest, the most dramatic, or even the most available, yet they are the ones men can't seem to forget? And on the other side, some women give everything, do everything right, love deeply, and still end up feeling replaceable. That difference is not luck. It is not just chemistry. It comes down to how they carry themselves in love, how they manage emotional access, and how they protect their own value without even trying to be distant. You can be stunning, smart, loyal, and still become easy to forget if you give your whole heart in a way that never asks for anything in return. That is the part nobody usually speaks about clearly. There are women who stay on a man's mind for a very long time, sometimes even years, and it is not always because they loved the most or gave the most. It is because they loved in a way that carried value. They gave warmth, but they did not give it carelessly or without balance. They showed affection, but they did not make it feel automatic or guaranteed. They stayed open, but not so open that everything became normal and nothing felt special anymore. And if this feels uncomfortable, it should, because truth often does not feel soft at first. What keeps someone unforgettable is never drama or playing games or acting distant for attention. It is not about pretending to be cold or unreachable. It is something quieter and deeper than that. It is the silent strength of a woman who understands her own worth so clearly that her presence never feels cheap or rushed or something that can be taken for granted. When a person carries themselves with that kind of inner value, everything about their energy feels different. And stay with this idea, because what you are hearing here can shift how you understand love, attraction, and even your own personal standards in relationships more than you may expect right now. Most people believe that being missed comes from giving more and more of themselves. More time, more attention, more access, more emotional effort, and more patience, thinking that this will make someone stay closer. But in reality, this often works in the opposite way. Human behavior is strange like that. We tend to value what feels meaningful, but we often ignore what feels endlessly available without effort. When something feels too easy to access all the time, it slowly loses its emotional weight. That is why some people are remembered deeply, while others are forgotten very quickly after things end. So when you notice that some women are not easy to forget, while others are moved on from very quickly, it is not always about looks or status or even chemistry alone. A big part of it is how they carried themselves in the relationship. It is how they made love feel like something important, not something automatic or expected every time. They did not pour all their energy out without thinking. Instead, they stayed aware of their own emotional value. This is not about becoming fake or distant. It is about becoming intentional with your heart and understanding that not everyone deserves the same level of access to you immediately. This is where the first shift begins. And it is where many women slowly lose their power without realizing it is happening. The first important understanding is simple but very powerful. Never make loving you feel like something that will always stay the same no matter how someone treats you. The moment a man feels completely sure that your love will not change, even if he puts in less effort, your emotional impact starts to weaken. It does not mean he stops caring instantly. It means he stops feeling the need to value your presence in the same way he once did. When there is no emotional risk of losing you, no need to work to maintain your trust, and no reason to improve his behavior, the connection becomes too easy. And when something becomes too easy, people often stop treating it with care. A woman who is always available, always forgiving before anything is truly repaired, and always understanding even when she is not respected, may think she is being kind or mature, but often, without realizing it, she is teaching someone that her boundaries do not need to be taken seriously. That is how emotional value slowly gets reduced. The difficult truth is that people do not deeply miss what became predictable in its lowest form. They miss what felt valuable, what felt like it required effort, and what made them rise to a better version of themselves. They miss the presence of someone whose love felt warm but not careless, soft but not easily replaceable, open but not endlessly guaranteed no matter what happens. That kind of emotional energy creates awareness in others. It makes them realize that your presence is not something ordinary. It is not something they can treat without thought and still keep in the same way. Think about how different everything feels when affection is connected with respect. Not fear, not manipulation, not silence games, but real respect. A woman who knows her worth does not need to repeatedly announce her standards in dramatic ways. She simply lives them through her actions. If she is treated with care, she naturally becomes warmer and more open. If she is dismissed, ignored, or taken lightly, she does not chase harder just to prove her love. Instead, she steps back into her own sense of dignity and self-respect. And that shift changes everything in the relationship dynamic. Now love is no longer something assumed or taken for granted. It becomes something that has meaning attached to behavior. It becomes something that can grow or shrink depending on how two people show up. Too often, people believe that giving unconditional access will make someone feel secure and closer, but in many cases, it does the opposite. It can make the other person less aware, less careful, and less emotionally responsible. Because when something is always available without condition, it stops feeling special and starts feeling expected. What people usually remember most is not the one who gave everything without limits, but the one who gave kindness with self-respect still fully intact. The one who did not lose herself in trying to keep someone. The one who did not need to perform strength because she already carried it naturally within her behavior. The one who made it clear through her actions that her energy, time, and emotional presence are not automatic privileges, but things that are shared when there is genuine care and effort on both sides. That is the kind of presence that becomes unforgettable. It creates emotional awareness in a relationship. It makes people realize that access to you is not something they can take lightly. It also creates meaning around your absence. When you are not present, it is felt differently because your presence was never empty or careless to begin with. This is where emotional memory begins to form strongly because now your presence carries weight and your absence creates reflection instead of indifference. And this is only the beginning because many women lose themselves not due to lack of strength, but because they care deeply and move too quickly with that care. The second important understanding is to keep your own world alive and stable. A woman becomes far more magnetic when love adds to her life instead of becoming her entire life. The moment a man becomes the center of everything, slowly and quietly, her own identity starts shifting without her noticing it clearly at first. She begins canceling parts of her life, reducing her personal goals, stepping away from hobbies, and slowly disconnecting from friendships and routines that once gave her happiness. At the beginning, this can feel like love, even like deep connection. But over time, it creates emotional imbalance because the version of her that was originally attractive was not someone empty or waiting. It was someone already full of life, already engaged in her own direction, and already emotionally rich on her own. That is the version of her he was naturally drawn to. Not someone who needed to be completed, but someone who was already complete in herself. When a woman keeps her own life active, she stays mentally and emotionally rich. She brings new experiences into the relationship. She carries her own energy into conversations and moments instead of depending on the relationship to create all emotional stimulation. This keeps her presence alive, layered, and interesting in a natural way that does not feel forced or dependent. This is why men often end up missing the woman who still had her own direction, her own goals, and her own rhythm of life that did not depend entirely on them. She was not trying to be hard to reach. She was simply living fully. And that difference matters a lot more than people realize. Because being with her did not feel like managing someone's emotional survival. It felt like entering a world that already had movement, purpose, and life in it, which naturally creates deeper attraction and respect over time. And it is important to be honest about this because nothing kills attraction faster than emotional dependency that becomes too heavy. A strong relationship does not come from two people becoming one empty space. It comes from two complete individuals choosing each other while still maintaining their own identity. That balance creates space, stability, and natural desire. Without that space, even love can start to feel overwhelming instead of meaningful, no matter how real the emotions are. The third understanding is more difficult for many people because it requires emotional maturity rather than emotional reaction. It is about learning emotional control, not emotional suppression. Not hiding what you feel or pretending nothing affects you, but not letting every feeling control your actions immediately. It means learning to pause before reacting, to think before expressing, and to understand that not every emotion needs to be spoken the moment it appears inside you. When every fear, insecurity, or emotional wave is expressed instantly without reflection, the relationship can start feeling heavy instead of stable. The other person may begin to feel like they are constantly responsible for managing your internal emotional state. That creates pressure, even if there is love involved. Over time, when everything is shared at full intensity without timing or balance, nothing feels special anymore because everything starts blending into the same emotional level without clarity or space. They had an inner steadiness that most people overlook but deeply feel when they meet it. They knew how to sit with a feeling instead of reacting instantly to it. They could understand what they were experiencing, let it settle, and only then decide whether it needed to be shared, how it should be shared, and when the timing would make it meaningful. That one ability quietly changes everything in relationships because it removes chaos and replaces it with presence. When such a woman finally opens up, it does not feel like noise or emotional overflow. It feels like trust. It feels intentional. It feels like something rare being offered, not something spilling out uncontrollably in every direction. That is why emotional intimacy with her feels different. It feels sacred instead of constant. Think about how powerful it is when someone who is usually calm and composed looks at you and says something honest, specific, and deeply personal. It lands differently. You actually feel the weight of it. You remember it. Now compare that to someone who expresses everything all the time without any filtering, pacing, or emotional timing. Even meaningful words lose their impact when they are constantly repeated at full volume. Nothing stands out anymore. Nothing feels special. The emotional effect becomes diluted, even if the feelings behind it are real. Men do not miss being overwhelmed by emotion. What they often miss is being trusted with it. They miss the woman who allowed them into her inner world in thoughtful stages, not all at once. The one who made closeness feel earned instead of automatic. The one who created emotional depth gradually, so every layer felt like a new level of connection instead of a constant stream of intensity. And before this is misunderstood, it is important to be clear. This is not about shrinking your voice or holding back your truth. It is about sharpening your expression so that when you do open your heart, it carries direction, clarity, and real emotional force instead of becoming scattered energy. Here is another truth that is rarely said openly. Emotional control also protects you from false intimacy. Sometimes when you share too much too early, it creates the illusion of deep connection before any real depth has actually been built. You start feeling close because so much has been said, but words alone do not create true safety. Real safety is built through time, consistency, behavior, and character. It is not created in one emotional conversation. A woman who understands this does not rush to reveal every wound just because there is chemistry or attraction. She lets closeness grow at the same pace as trust. That makes her presence feel grounded and stable instead of emotionally scattered or premature. It also protects her from attaching too quickly to potential instead of reality. Many people only learn this after getting hurt. Not everyone who feels close in conversation deserves immediate access to your deepest emotional layers. Real intimacy is not something that should be forced or rushed. It unfolds slowly, naturally, through shared experience and proven consistency. When a woman respects that timing, she becomes far more centered in love. She is not hiding who she is. She is simply respecting the value of emotional access and not treating it as something cheap or immediate. That alone changes the entire quality of her relationships. Now, there is another layer that changes how memory works in attraction, never being completely figured out. This does not mean acting mysterious for attention or playing confusing games. It simply means not exposing every part of yourself too early. One of the most common mistakes people make is over-explaining themselves at the beginning. They share every story, every fear, every past wound, every belief, and every reason behind everything they do. They think this builds honesty and closeness, but sometimes it removes curiosity instead of building connection, because discovery matters. Human attention naturally responds to unfolding depth. The women who remain in a man's memory often did not reveal everything at once. They were open, but not fully complete in the beginning. There was always something more to understand about them, something more to feel, something more to discover over time. They did not hand over their entire emotional world on the first few interactions just to speed up connection. Instead, they allowed life and time to reveal them naturally. That pacing is what keeps attraction alive. This connects to something deeper about how attraction actually works. The mind pays stronger attention to things that feel meaningful, earned, and slightly incomplete. When something is too easy, too available, or too emotionally exposed from the beginning, it can lose its sense of value, even if it is genuinely good. When love, attention, and emotional access are given without pacing or mutual effort, they can stop feeling special simply because there is no sense of building or earning involved. But when emotional closeness develops through consistency, respect, and gradual trust, it gains weight. It becomes something that feels harder to lose. It becomes something that carries emotional importance. That is why a woman who maintains her own standards, her own life, her own emotional balance, and a natural sense of mystery often leaves a deeper impression than someone who gives everything instantly. She is not creating attraction through confusion. She is creating it through value and structure. There is also another important dynamic at play. Many men want to feel effective in a relationship. They want to feel that their presence matters, that their effort creates change, and that they are building something meaningful with someone. But if everything is already fully given at the start, there is nothing left to grow into. There is no emotional space for effort to shape the connection. And without that sense of progression, investment often weakens over time. In the end, the real lesson is not about becoming distant, confusing, or less loving. It is about becoming more aware of yourself in love. When you understand your own value, you naturally stop overgiving, over-explaining, and losing yourself too quickly in emotional intensity. You begin to build relationships on balance, respect, and consistency instead of impulse. True connection grows when two people bring their whole lives, not when one person disappears into the other. Love becomes stronger when it is given with patience, timing, and self-respect. And what stays in memory is not perfection or excess, but sincerity combined with emotional steadiness. When you stay connected to your own life while opening your heart in a healthy way, you create relationships that feel stable, meaningful, and real for both people involved.